somewhere in, I don't know when it occurred, but I was with Srila Prabhupada in Delhi. And fortunately I was good friends with Shruti Kirti, so he was always allowing me to get a little close to Srila Prabhupada. And like that same mood that I had had in Dallas, I was always trying to figure out some way to be in a space. So somehow or another, I was helping Shruti Kirti, backing him up, serving Srila Prabhupada, doing some of the errands and running. And then everyone left, and Shruti Kirti said, gave me the bell, so I was the one who, if Prabhupada rang the bell, that I had to go see what he wanted. And I was certainly hoping he wouldn't ring the bell for some reason. It was too intimate or too much responsibility. But anyhow, Prabhupada did ring the bell, and I came and offered my obeisances. And he's standing in a room next to his room, and he's looking at the wall, and there's really nothing on the wall. But he's asking me about the painting and asking me, what do I think about the painting? Should the painting be here? And I couldn't figure out whether he was asking me if the room should be painted, what color the paint should be, or should we put some painting on the wall? And I kept, a little bit, whatever you think, Srila Prabhupada. I was trying to get out of thinking about it, like just throw it back at Prabhupada, whatever you say, Srila Prabhupada. He goes, no, not whatever I say. What do you think? What do you think? What do you want to do for Krishna? And it was a very instructive moment, and I don't even know what I said at that point, because I still didn't know what he was talking about, so it was incredibly awkward, but I didn't forget that part of it, that he was very keen on having us not just following rules and regulations, but was keen on having us think for ourselves and finding out how we could serve Krishna. And that Krishna was in our hands also, and he had given him to us, and now we were to use the best of our intelligence how to serve him. So before I'm going to Africa, Brahmananda, Tamal Krishna, Srila Prabhupada, and Shruti Kirti are living in a house right near the Bombay temple. And Brahmananda asked me to come and live there too, so that I can help more or less be a sannyasi servant and also back up Shruti Kirti. So I'm doing all the shopping for the house and the laundry for everyone, and maybe taking Prabhupada's plate away, washing the dishes. It was a really wonderful engagement. It was like just living in the spiritual master's house with a few devotees and being engaged all the time. And then in the evening there'd be programs. And one time I was asked to arrange a car for Srila Prabhupada. So I don't know who or what I did, but I found somebody to bring a car. And the person shows up with the car, and it's an American lowrider car, just this really honky thing, And Tamal Krishna's looking at me like, oh, you're toast here. This is really bad. Anyhow, Prabhupada doesn't bat an eye, gets in the car and rides to the temple, and there's a kind of a young, hip Bombay guy driving the car. It was his car, and it was quite fine. Then another car experience, I'm walking to get into the car with Srila Prabhupada, and I'm carrying his bags. I think it's just me and Shruti Kirti. And Prabhupada steps into the car, and as he's getting in, just as he's sitting down, he goes, Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda, Shri Advaita Gadadhar, Shri Vasudeva Gaur Bhaktavrinda. And it was literally as if the universe had stopped. Everything became so thick and heavy. However the mood in which Prabhupada had said that, it just, both Shruti Kirti and I were more or less just stunned for a moment. So just a very simple memory of something. So this was back in Bombay again, when I was living in that house with Tamal Krishna, Brahmananda, and Shruti Kirti. And I think it was one day, midday, Prabhupada had called Tamal into his room, and I was more or less in, Prabhupada's room was there, and then there was a middle room, and I was sitting more or less standing guard, or just, being there in the house, a bit on call. And Prabhupada was talking with Tamal, and I began to hear Tamal raising his voice and more or less really arguing vehemently against Srila Prabhupada. And Prabhupada was talking, the subject was that Tamal should go to China. And Prabhupada was just speaking so calmly, even though Tamal was, in my estimation, I had never heard anyone raise their voice against Srila Prabhupada or an argument. He was just being incredibly strong in his statement. Obviously their relationship in preaching was very intimate, but so I was more or less overwhelmed by that. But in retrospect, I remember just hearing Srila Prabhupada's patient voice, that Tamal would throw out some loud objection, and Prabhupada would just kindly diminish that objection and speak very much like a patient father with a enraged child who wasn't following his directions. So Brahmananda had gone back to India for a program, and during that time, somehow or another, Prabhanu was there, and we had been collecting a lot, and I got to pay for the whole temple with our collections. And Prabhupada had written me a letter saying that he had always wanted the temple to be paid for, and that I had done that in Brahmananda's absence, and he was very grateful for that, and that this preaching work to the African devotees is the most important preaching in the world, and we must continue to do this. So having gone to Africa after receiving that garland and blessing from Prabhupada and just the personal contact, I was probably as fired up in my own personal preaching as I had ever been, because and everything was falling into place. I was extremely successful in dealing with Indians, and it was just very inspired. So for a great length of time, that enthusiasm was there, but gradually it did wane, and I had my difficulties in Africa. And one of them was that I had misappropriated some funds and bought this Rolex watch. And I actually bought it for myself. It was one with a striped gold string down it with a gold around it. Anyhow, so I go to India, and I'm feeling really mortified that I've done this. I'm a brahmachari, and watches were kind of like the thing that you could be attached to or something. It was, even though it's bogus, still everybody had watches. So anyhow, I on my going back to India, I've decided I want to give this to Srila Prabhupada. So when I get to Bombay, I remember Prabhupada was walking with a group of devotees, and I walk up and pay my obeisances, and Prabhupada folds his hands and says hello to me, with pranams, and I'm just overwhelmed that he's even noticing me or remembers me, in any way, that his intimate way of dealing with people again. So Shruti Kirti makes an arrangement for me to come up and see Srila Prabhupada, and it's just myself, Shruti Kirti, and Paramahamsa, and sitting at a table just 2 feet away from Srila Prabhupada, and he's sitting across from me. And I give him the Rolex watch, and he goes, "Oh, Rolex. And he puts it on, and he has another watch on, so he has both watches on at that point. And he's looking, and he looks at me, and he begins lecturing on the purity of Lord Chaitanya's movement, how that we are only different from others because we are following purely these principles that Lord Chaitanya has presented, and that will be the success of our movement, is that if we follow everything purely. And he went on for maybe 20 minutes, a half hour, personally lecturing me on the purity of Lord Chaitanya's movement and how it was important not to spend a farthing of Krishna's money on sense gratification. And, I felt from the very beginning he had seen all the way through me and knew that I had got this for myself, and this was my act of patrician redemption, giving it to him. But he was just extremely gracious and warm and strict all at the same time, and Shruti Kirti and Paramahansa were more or less amazed at the talk too. It was just, that he had taken so much time, and so I got to pay my obeisances and leave. And I think that was pretty much the last time I really had personal contact with Srila Prabhupada. Je anilo